Welcome to the Branded Impact Podcast. On this show, we go beyond surface level branding, honest conversations with industry leaders, behind the scenes of aligned brand building, and actionable insights to help you elevate your presence. I'm your host, Jocelyn Espejo, aka Joe. Hit subscribe and join me each week for the Branded Impact Podcast. Hello and welcome back. Today's guest is someone who has been redefining what it means to build a business on your terms. Abagail is the owner and CEO of The Boss Project, where she helps service providers build profitable, sustainable businesses without the burnout. In this episode, we're digging into what it means to build a brand around your bandwidth, how to shift out of hustle mode, and why sustainability is the new success metric. If you're growing but feeling misaligned, this one is for you. Abagail, thank you so much for joining me. I would love for you to start with what originally inspired you to create The Boss Project and what does branding mean to you today?
There's a lot to this, but to give you a little background, I originally launched my brand as Think Creative. Initially, it was an agency, a design agency. My background is in graphic design. And so I was serving local small businesses and their graphic design needs, anything from business cards to setups for conventions to website design. It was kind of all over the place. I eventually honed in on website design being the main thing I was doing for clients. But throughout that journey, I started posting consistently, primarily on a blog at the time, about what it took to grow my business, how I was landing clients, how I was doing high-end sales, how I was using XYZ software. And ultimately that started to grow an audience. And they weren't necessarily my ideal clients on the agency side. I needed to do something with them. And so over time, I ultimately morphed into focusing more primarily on the education piece. It went from Think Creative to Think Creative Collective, and then eventually was rebranded as Boss Project. And, 10 years later, I'm feeling like it's not quite the name that I want to stick with for the rest of my career. So we'll see if it morphs again. But I was able to ultimately teach entrepreneurs all over the world. I've had over 41,000 students. My podcast has been downloaded 4.5 million times or something crazy like that.
That's amazing.
And I think in terms of branding, what ultimately really gave me a leg up, in my opinion, was using my background. So I came out the gate looking like I'd been in business because I was branded like I had been in business. Like I wasn't coming out as like a novice looking, personal blogger. I looked like a company from the get-go. And I think that made a huge difference in the trajectory of where my business has ultimately gone.
I've seen that so many times. And I often hear, though, the opposite. Like I keep hearing people say, once I'm successful or once I hit this milestone, then I will invest in branding, whether that be the professional, anything, logo, design, creative, all that stuff. But I've found those that invest in the branding early. And I'm not saying you have to go do like the crazy expensive, but like the ones that come out of the gate looking, like you said, the business that's already in, not the novice, not the DIY.
Yeah. And I do think it's different than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was like, how do I make sure my website kind of matches the persona of the kind of person I want to give off? Now, I don't necessarily think a website is less critical. It definitely helps you long-term in terms of long-term sustainable growth. But if we're talking about like looking legit out the gate, I'm talking more about, using professional photography. And if you're going to do video, instead of just doing everything in app, you kind of developing a signature editing style can make a really big difference in people noticing you. Now, I realize all of that is a time investment, but it can be really worth it in the long term. I do think people don't do it early because they're not sure who they are yet. Like they're not sure where they're going or what their business is going to turn into. And while I totally understand, I do think you picking a direction for now is going to help. You can ultimately morph and edit and change and pivot and do all of those things later. So you're not marrying the look and feel of the brand you create today. You're creating a foundation for you to grow from.
I love that. And I say that often. I'm like, you're not marrying it. Like, just pick sometimes. And even though I say about being a perfectionist, I'm like, done is better than perfect. Let's just get started. And then as you grow and as you evolve, so can your brand. And you were just even talking about how your brand has evolved over time. You started as Think Creative, and then it changed again. And then now you've been the Boss project. And you're even thinking about maybe as you're morphing and you're evolving, you're like, maybe this doesn't fit anymore. You're just going to change. And I think that's totally fine. One of the things that you talk about when you're designing your business, and I've heard you say this, is designing around your bandwidth. Can you share what that looks like in practice? Because I think that's one of those, it's almost like branding. It's like one of those like, okay, everything in balance and everything in these pieces, but I love the bandwidth approach. And then sometimes it also is like, okay, but what does that really mean?
So what I'm really saying is I want to see more people design businesses that make sense in the context of their real lives. So many people go out with a plan that is built around making something scalable. And they're thinking about, how can I make sure that this works with 2 people, with 10 people, with 100 people, with 1,000 people? And while there's definitely some of that has to be included in the equation, I don't think infinite scalability is the goal. I think creating a business that allows you to not only sustain the life you have, but build towards the life you want and secure a financial future, that's the dream. And the majority of small business owners I know have no interest in running a $10 million company or a $100 million company or a $1 billion company. They just want to feed their families and live a good life. And if you go in with that context, you can start to define those boundaries a bit early on. Now, it's not to say that there aren't going to be periods of your business where you're working harder or more hours. I'm not saying that time doesn't exist, but you can put up guardrails that help you design something that you can maintain yourself within a reasonable amount of time on a weekly basis and make that work for the season of life you're in right now. And when that season of life changes, because it will, like, you're not going to stay at the same capacity all the time. You're going to have a baby, or you're going to have a health challenge, or you're going to have a move across country, or like there's a million reasons why your life will go down a new path. And those are inflection points when we have to really reflect on what makes sense for our business today and how do I make sure it makes sense for tomorrow and the things I'm going to be coming up against.
Do you have some examples of some guardrails that you've put in place?
Oh, for sure. So in terms of what that looks like, I used to have no boundaries around the time of day that I worked. I was working nights, weekends, every kind of gap in my day. The moment my husband left for work to the moment he came home, we'd have dinner together, maybe watch a show. He would go to bed. I would keep working. That's obviously not sustainable. So at one point, my boundaries came in that I was going to work only during certain hours of the day. 95% of the time would stick to that. There's obviously still exceptions to the rule. Today, that's still true, but now I only work 4 days a week. And I work, 22 to 27 hours a week or something like that, if you were to add it all up, which is a part-time in the grand scheme of things. But I earn a full-time income that is ultimately the thing that funds my whole family. Like, my husband is full-time in my business too, and this is what we're doing. This is it.
That's it. You're all in.
I am all in.
I laughed when you said, because I lived that, where it's like you're fitting it in. And so part of me has lived this world where, because of this phase of my life, my kids are needing to be Ubered everywhere. And so and I want to be present, but then I feel like I am working sometimes in between. But then there are times where I get to be intentional about, okay, it's summer. I am going to cut back on the work so I can be more intentional and be more present for family vacations and all those pieces. And then whether or not you're launching or scaling or doing something new does require pieces. But I love the boundaries piece. And I do love the fact and your shift on what are you really wanting? Because I see that so often in the scaling. You're working so hard and then you move the bar again. And then you just kind of feel like you're in this constant state of like, I'm not making it. I'm not where I want to be and pushing versus really just what is it that you really want? And what does that look like? And you're right. Most of it comes down to, I want to provide a certain amount of money so that I can impact my family. I can create a legacy and I can create this life that I'm looking to live. And a lot of us say time freedom, and then we end up flipping the switch and we are not getting time freedom. We're inundated with all of the things that we're doing in the wrong model. So question, when you find yourself in that, what is the number one, like, do you have a tip as far as how to shift yourself out? You're working too much and it's not creating the life that you thought you wanted.
Yeah, I think part of it is really defining what do you want? Because, someone listening to the show is going to be like, oh, well, I need to have a more structured amount of time I work and I can only work these hours or whatever. But is that actually what you want? Like, there's plenty of people that do want to be able to work at 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. and 2 o'clock in the afternoon and like go on a hike or, take their kids to this activity or do whatever. You have to define what it is that you're actually looking to have your life look like. And instead of building towards something that will allow you to unlock that, what amount of that can you just start living right now? Part of that is really being intentional about noticing what those things are. So, for me, I love a slow start to the morning, like staying in my pajamas, laying in bed, flipping through some videos, having breakfast on the deck, maybe going for a walk, listening to a book, getting ready, and I might not actually hit my desk until 10 a.m. And I used to beat myself up about it. Like, you have to get ready and start your day and be at your desk and be productive. And then it was like, wait, the life I want is slow mornings and not feeling this pressure to have to be on all the time. I don't have to do anything different. I can have that now. I don't need more money to have that now. I can just have that now.
Oh, I love that approach.
Really focusing on how you can incorporate those moments into your day or structure into your day or lack of structure into your day, whatever it is that you're looking for, what percentage of that can you adapt now? And I realize a lot of it can only be unlocked with more finances. So I'm not naive to that privilege. I get that, but also know that you working more is not always going to unlock more income. That those things are not correlated.
That's so true. And I think sometimes it's the life by design, but creating that space. So one of the things that I've tried to do, because I'm like, yeah, that sounds amazing. And I would love to have a slower start or to be able to work out, or I intentionally am I want to make sure I'm present until my kids leave for school. And then I want to try to be home most days once they're back from school. So I am one of those people that I really do enjoy working, especially editing and all those pieces once everyone's gone to sleep. Cause I'm it's peaceful, it's quiet, I can really zone out. But starting with a doesn't have to be every day. So if that's your goal, for me, I started with every other Friday, trying to block some me time. And then eventually I'm going to get to that full 4-day work week, but I'm not there right now. But that's where I've started with putting some pieces. And can I start to design that, but slowly? If that's your ideal, it doesn't have to be, I say the same thing when you're creating content. If you've done nothing, don't tell yourself you're going to do it 7 days a week. Anytime you're trying to create some habit, pick it up in a way that you can do it and eventually become consistent, stick with it, and then you can add more.
Well, and I think to that end, something that I said in a podcast recently that I just cannot stop thinking about is doing less than you're capable of. We are often creating, showing up, spending time in a way that is unsustainable. That we are doing past our max capacity of whatever it looks like, energy, emotion, time, money, all of it. what if you did less than you could do? Because you could do all of these things. You could do, like, I could list a million things I'm confident you listening could accomplish. But what if you intentionally didn't try to hit 100%?
That's a shift that most people are not comfortable with. And I think that's the piece. And it's like being okay. Like there's been times where I've been intentional about just sitting and not planning something. And then I have to go in my mind, like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to be doing something right now. That was the whole point of you doing this piece. But then we sit there and we're like struggling with, the shoulds. We should be doing something. We should be active. We should be productive. And then you get caught up in this vicious cycle.
You do. And I promise you that people are doing far less and making far more money, and they're making it far less complicated. Like, I know the reason you're listening to the show is because you care and you want to act a certain way and look a certain way and perform a certain way and get in a certain results a certain way. But like, there's someone on TikTok that makes a full-time living, I'm confident, from smearing, I don't know if it's whipped cream or shaving gel or what, but head to toe all over their body, and they sit in a shower. And like, I have come across this on my feed a couple of times, but you look at her feed and it's 100% that. And she has so many followers, and I'm sure she's completely monetizing based off of views and nothing else. And her entire get up is that it's just shock value. It's just like, what the heck is happening? Like,
And
that's the entire point. And I think so often we are so focused on like having a legitimate offer and having a great client experience and having the perfect branding and like all of this stuff. And it's like, more isn't better. You know, you having a simple approach that consistently brings you in a level of income that affords you the life that you want, that's all we're striving for.
Since so simplified in this world where we're like constantly on the go. So we've been kind of talking about some of the mistakes that we make and things like that. But if you were to like look at it, what's one of the top two that you see like high achieving women make in regards to branding? Is it trying to do too much? You know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think so often it's an attempt to mimic or look like someone else, and they really need to figure out who they are. You know, I get it. I love, you know, paying attention to what other creators are doing. I'm inspired by their use of typography or color or graphics, or even how they choose to show up from a personality perspective. And I can be inspired by all of those things, but I really have to spend time thinking about, who am I without influence? Who am I without feeling like I have to hit a certain trend? Who am I without feeling like I have to be conscious of what's going to go viral or work? Because I promise you, the content that will perform the best is content that is most authentic to who you actually are and isn't performative. You know, if you want to be a comedian or an actor or like put on a persona, that is a career option. But if your goal is to build a business, you have to be genuinely yourself and put that front and center. So really being mindful of, hey, I like this thing, not, hey, I'm trying to mimic or be this thing.
Oh, I love that. That was a great piece of advice.
Yeah. As far as another one that a ton of people make, let's see. I think a lot of people spend far too much time thinking about what is working right now in the context of the world we live today. Like, how is this particular social media app performing? How are people buying? What's their buying behavior like? How are people doing XYZ thing? And we are choosing to follow ultimately behind someone else who is leading the way. I would encourage you to think about, if you were doing what you want to do more of, or what you want to do and you don't see anyone doing, what would that be? That is far more important and will get you far further faster than trying to follow the leader. Be the leader. Put yourself out there. Don't do the thing that everyone's already done. Do the thing first. And that's hard because obviously being novel is not all that common these days, but you can do something new, I promise. Getting there is a bunch of testing. It's a bunch of experimentation. It's a bunch of putting yourself out there. And on the other side, that's where we can kind of contend with who we want to become. You know, it's only then that we need to be worried about that.
So I love the authenticity piece and I love the challenge to be you and try something new. But when should someone realize that they need to pivot or rebrand? And I think you're tying it in. And this is where I think if we piece in that don't mimic and don't be like somebody else and you want to be authentic, I think for me, a lot of that comes back to what is your vision? What is your passion? And what can you truly sustain? Because you can sustain being yourself because that's who you are. Trying to sustain being like someone else can be exhausting. But for those that like have been trying and it's almost like you feel like you're beating a dead horse or knocking your head against the wall, when do you recommend? Because there has to be some sort of, you have to try it. And you can't try it for a week and then bail because that's not enough time. You have to be consistent for a little while to see if it's working. When should someone be like, okay, maybe I need to rethink my offer, or maybe it is time for a rebrand? You know, what is like, I think that's the piece. That's $1 million question. And I think a lot of people are like, okay, when is enough enough?
Sure. So I just finished the book, The Dip by Seth Godin. And in the book, he's specifically talking about when to endure and when to quit. And he argues that we need to be quitting more often than we are. And we need to quit more and like sustain less things ultimately. But to get to the point of success, we need to not bail on the things that matter. And he talks about enduring the dip, essentially, where like you've started a thing, you've maybe consistently shown up in a thing, and you're essentially trudging through the muck until you get to the point of, quote, success on the other side, whatever that ultimately is. And how do you determine what those things are? What do you need to let go of versus what should you keep going on? And I don't think there's a perfect answer. Like, I genuinely think you have to really ask yourself, like, are you quitting because it's hard? Or are you quitting because it's not in alignment? Are you quitting because it doesn't match your values or your morals? Are you quitting because you want to spend your time doing something else? Like, you need to really assess where that's coming from. And if it's just because it's hard and you don't want to do the work, I mean, you can quit, but that's probably the thing that's going to be the thing you're supposed to be spending more time on. And so many people 80% quit or 90% quit, but they like don't like totally let it go. And that's the thing that's like literally pulling weight behind them, preventing them from moving forward. And they just got to cut that off. They got to figure it out. They got to cut it off. And now I think all of that sounds far better in idea than it is in practice because it's challenging. Like, how do you know what that actually is? But if you are really mindful of that timepiece and your actual capacity, it's likely about being more selective as to your priorities. So if you have your priorities in alignment, it'll become far more clear how you should be spending your time and what you should trudge through the dip on versus what you should let go.
That's awesome. I think one of the things that I tend to see a lot of us do is we're holding on to something because we said that's what we wanted to do. Like, we got started with this idea and intent, and sometimes you nailed it. You're like, yes, this is so fulfilling. It's what I want to do. I'm starting to see success. And then there's also times where I know for myself, I went down a path and I love newborn photography. I think it is amazing. I think the babies are beautiful. And I had this grand vision of doing that. And then I found myself about 1.5 years in dreading newborn sessions. it was exhausting. My body hurt. Like I didn't love it. And I was like, but I'm choosing to do this because I said I was going to. And so I actually had to take a step and realize this is an alignment. I don't enjoy it. Like I don't want to dread going to work. That wasn't the whole point and the whole purpose. Now I'm like, bring me all the newborn babies to snuggle with, and then go find the newborn photographer that is amazing at newborn photography. And that when she gets your client session booking, she's lighting up, not going, oh God, here we go. And I think that's a great way, at least for me, that's been a nice check-in am I doing this because it does bring me joy and I do enjoy it. And now it's hard. Like, yes, I still have to go find the clients. And entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. I tell people that all the time. You cannot join this thinking it's going to be easy. This is not the easy way out.
It's not the easy way out, but I do think there is things that you will inevitably have to do and endure that aren't fun and like are just part of it. And so I think you can go too far with like editing based on this doesn't bring me joy, because that could mean you stop, doing your bookkeeping and then you have tax fraud and you go to jail. Like there's literally consequences for giving up some of the things you don't like doing. So
that's true.
You have to be paying attention on both ends of the spectrum and hit that happy middle. As far as like, should I do it because I do or don't like it? I think if you're the kind of person that like sticks to your promises to yourself, then you may have a hard time quitting. I'm the kind of person that has no problem quitting promises to myself, but I have a really hard time quitting promises I've made to other people. And so I'm more likely to hang on to things that are outward facing than internal, just by the nature of how I make decisions and how I operate in my daily life. I think that makes it easier to understand where you're probably holding on to it, because clearly I have no problem letting go of things that take up my time because it's about me. But if I'm worried about, but I built this product with my students in mind and now I want to shut it down, like that's the thing I'm going to be like, but it's helping people, but it's dated, but I need to redo it, but I don't want to redo it, but it doesn't make sense. But they have it. Like that's the thing I'm going to struggle with. And I think people are going to end up on both ends of the spectrum and you just have to figure out where you are. And I think it's a matrix. I can't remember the name of the matrix, but essentially it's a combination of how do you hold promises, both externally and internally. And it's a quadrant. So some of you can do it really well outwardly, but not inward. Some of you can do it really well inward, but not outward. Some of you can do both. Like you keep all of your promises. And then some of you are going to be a rebel where you do none of that. You don't do either one. And based on that, that's going to give you a better idea of like what are the things you're actually going to struggle with letting go of. If you're a rebel, you probably like you're listening to this and you're like, why are we still talking about quitting? But everyone else is struggling with what to let go of.
Well, and I'm like, okay, yes, please don't let go of the thing that's going to end you up in jail. But I will say too, for the outsourcing piece, that's maybe a check-in too for like, if it's something that's got to be done to move your business or keep it in flow, then maybe it's time to look at bringing on some help to have somebody come in. I think that was one of the things that when I was looking at outsourcing, I was like, okay, what can I let go of? And it wasn't, okay, I can't do that. Bookkeeping was one of the first things I was happy to let go of. I brought on someone because I was like, you know what? Sitting here and looking at my, like what's going in and what's going out and how to match it up in QuickBooks, I was like, you might as well, no. Like, I don't want to. I would leave it for once a year and that was an entire nightmare. So I don't recommend doing that. Stay consistent. But, maybe look at outsourcing and bringing that on. So as Abagail said, you don't end up in jail because you want to make sure that everything is good and all of your pieces. Okay. So you have rebranded yourself and you've done it a couple times and you're even considering doing it again. But what was one of the things that changed about your approach each time?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we're talking about rebranding myself, I've done it far more than 3 times, but the rebranding the business, always had some sort of causation. Like there was a reason to make the change. I think there's a lot of power in consistency. So I don't actually recommend like a full rebrand very often because, you know, you can invest a lot of time, effort, money into things like search engine optimization. And if you go and change the name of your brand every 5 seconds, like you're never going to build authority online. And so you do have to do these things in a very intentional way. I think as far as you, though, you can do pivots whenever you want, but like how you're publicly perceived is not necessarily the same. And so I think your public perception shifting is something that you have to control far more than all the internal pieces of running a business and being a creator that can shift and change. For example, I grew a team to 10 full-time employees. We were doing over $1 million a year in business. We had a launch that did over $300,000. All of that sounds great on paper, all of it. And I found myself completely removed from the creation piece of the business. I was essentially like the show pony. Like I showed up to teach the workshop, to record the podcast, and every other piece of my time was spent managing people. But I enjoy being a creator. Like I love to write. I love to create. I love to connect with people. And I became so far removed. So a pivot I made was how I structured my business internally. And that wasn't something I did overnight. I didn't go and like fire 10 people all at once. Like that wasn't ethically in alignment for the kind of person I am. But when people left, I didn't backfill their position. I let go of more things. I stopped taking on so many new opportunities and really honed in on what I was offering and ultimately did less. It took time. It took 4 years of transition. But now I'm at the point where it's just me and one other person full time. And everyone else is just contractors. And I feel so much lighter. And it'd be really easy to say, oh, she like rebranded herself and like now she's like this solopreneur, blah, blah, blah. But that's not how I changed. Like I changed internal structure, but how I talk out loud, like the majority of people would have no clue that I got to 10 employees and have no clue I'm back down to 2. None. Like no, like people would just not know. And I think you have to be conscious of what is going out the door versus what's happening like behind closed doors. I think is kind of my way to talk about it. But if there's something more specific you want to dig into, they're happy to.
I think the biggest piece, it just ties back into the authenticity of it. And then as you're rebranding. So there's so many facets and faces to running a business. And I think you nailed the fact that sometimes it's happening behind the scenes. No one sees it. And we get caught up in it because it's impacting us, right? Like you making the decision to go from having 10 full-time employees to not backfilling to slowly. And I applaud you for the moral side of like, I'm not just going to fire everyone today because it was a knee-jerk reaction. It's like, no, I built the company to here. It's not in alignment with what I want and how I see it going. So I'm going to pivot. And you did it over time. I think that's a testament to when you're building a business and you're doing all these pieces, more of it runs in our head as far as what's tied into what people see. But you get to control the narrative that's on the outside. And then when it comes to rebranding, for me, a lot of times when I'm talking about branding on the visual side of branding is what are you putting out there? And as you are evolving and as you are growing, you get to shift that. But it all comes back to being authentic. Like I think that for me, like who I was 5 years ago is I'm a completely different person today. So when you look at my business, you look at my branding from 5 years ago and you look at it now, it's morphed and shifted, but so have I. And so I feel very aligned with where I am now. And so I think that's where, has there been a trigger? Like, do I look at my branding and feel like I see myself? Because I want people to look at my branding and feel like they're getting to know me. Do you have any tips or things like that on the rebranding side where it's like, this may be time? Like if you're looking at your branding and your materials, or you're going to put something out there, like, is there some kind of trigger where you're like, maybe it's time for a brand photo refresh, or to kind of manipulate some of the visual side?
I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to, does who you are match online as you are in person? So, for example, when I started my business, I had this like pastel, like soft, nurturing looking brand. It was very quiet and had like a calligraphy font logo and all of this stuff. And if you walked into my closet, it is literally a rainbow. Like there is so many bold prints and patterns and colors. And if you meet me in person, I have a lot of opinions. Like I am not hesitant to share those with you. And I'm not necessarily a quiet person. I can be. I know how to be reserved. But in a lot of ways, carrying that persona was me putting on a mask. I was trying to show up as a palatable version of myself rather than who I really am. And so I think if your brand is starting to not match that, you need an edit. Like in the same way that you like slowly replace pieces in your closet because they don't fit anymore or the style isn't right or it doesn't make sense for your lifestyle. Like you have to do the same thing in your business, like the actual same thing. And, you know, most people do this in like a fell swoop, like my brand looks this way. And then they'll make this like edit. And now my brand looks this way. I think it's more typical or authentic in a way that's less shocking when you're just like slowly making changes to the point that no one is surprised. Like people should not be surprised by a new brand. If they're surprised by a new brand, then they don't know who you are. It should all feel very natural. That's all very focused on personal, like a personal brand where you are the business and the business is you. But if you're running a company, that is different and should be approached completely different from a branding perspective, in my opinion. I wouldn't make slow shifts over time. I would be very mindful about creating something that is classic and timeless, and you can make slow edits over time. Like you can have your opinions about a brand like Coca-Cola, but look at how their brand has changed over the last 100 years. It is very incremental, but also like not all that different. Like you would still know Coke today from Coke 100 years ago. So if you're building a company and you want to remove yourself from it, then it needs to be able to stand alone. But if you're trying to build a personal brand, it needs to be a reflection of you.
That's some good food for thought and for like how you're wanting to do it. And I think the long-term goals, because if you're wanting to build a personal brand and everything revolves around you, it is very different. And then I like your edits. I like that version of it. And one of the things for me, I'm like, guys, you can be very timeless in the framework, and then you can update brand photo. I mean, I'm a little partial to brand photography. It's what I love to do. But I think for me, like that's the edits that you can do. So as your hair color changes, as your closet changes, and I'm going to have to figure out how to play on that closet refresh on how we can tie that in. Because I love that analogy that you said, like your brand should evolve, just like we get rid of pieces of clothing that no longer fit right, feel right. We don't feel as confident in it. And so for me, like if you find yourself excusing, like, oh, here's my website, but if there's any but after it, like maybe time for an edit. If you're giving them a business card and you say anything other than here you go, I can't wait to connect with you later. Like if there's any excuse that you feel, like I think that's something for me. If you're starting to feel like there's a disconnect and you're requiring any explanation beyond here's my contact information, this is how you get a hold of me, then I think it's time for an edit. I like that phrasing too.
Yeah. And I would really be mindful about not spending all of your time and attention there. Like there's been, as much as I have a very branded persona all over the internet, there are so many times I have gone rogue. There are so many times I've used different fonts or different colors or different whatever because I wanted to. And nobody's like that is not you, blah, blah, blah. Like, nobody is micromanaging every post you put out into the world. So if you like something, do it. Like, if you feel confident about it, do it. Like, worry less about it all making sense and worry more about continuing to keep going. Like, motion and action is more important than like tweaking the things that people aren't going to pay attention to.
The done is better than perfect. Just get it done and keep moving. And I do love that, where it's like, don't spend so much time on the stuff that really, like, for me, get it done and let that be the thing. And that can help you make decisions and create content and help people, have people help you. So if you start bringing on a team, they have some guidelines and they know what to work within. But ultimately, if you're being yourself, that's going to be what really helps in the long run, because you're getting to be authentically you. So if you decide to pop up one day and you're like, well, this is me in my full non-branded whatever, it doesn't matter. It's you. And if that fits your brand, then that's perfect. But it should fit your brand because your brand is you. So I think that's where, for me, I'm like, guys, that's amazing. I think it's the holding on to, like, what is it that I'm ultimately trying to do? What is the legacy that I'm trying to create? What does bring me joy? And then what's working today? Because what worked 5 years ago doesn't work for me. Like 5 years ago, I would have never been on a podcast talking on video because it scared the living bejesus out of me. Now I'm like, hey, let's do this. I can talk to somebody on video all day long, still trying to get myself to believe that I'm comfortable on camera by myself. So we're still, after all of this time creating content, still working through that mindset journey. But I think it's one step at a time. I would love to hear one last piece of advice. If you've got someone who's been listening and they're like, okay, all of that sounds fantastic, but like, where do I really start, or how do I do this piece? Like, what's one piece of advice you've got?
Yeah. So I think one of the like most logical places to start that's like super tactile, like something that you can just run with and do immediately, is a time audit. So if you haven't documented how you're spending your time, I would do so for a week, and not just basic things throughout the day. Like, I checked my email and I did this or did that. I want you thinking about how you're spending all of your time. So like, you took the kids to school, or you made a meal, or you went on a walk. Like, record all of it. And then break that up into categories after the fact. Like, this was work, external, like you were helping clients or like selling or something. This was internal, meaning like it helped the operations of the business. This was personal. This was health related. This was whatever. You can have as many categories as you want. This is very dependent on you personally. And I want you to really think about, is that how you want to keep spending your time? Like, if you were to just redo next week and use the same percentages of all the time you spent on all these different categories, is that how you want your life to go? And if you had to do that every week for the next year, would you still be happy? And if you answer no, then like, we need to pay attention to that, because maybe you're spending twice as long on this one thing that you'd rather get rid of it to do this other thing. Like, that's going to help you get a clearer picture of where you want to go than if you just keep talking about it. Like, talking about it is not getting you anywhere. Looking at how you're actually doing it and then making changes, that's what's going to make a difference in your life.
Well, and I think what I have found from doing time audits is that my perception, where I thought I was spending time, wasn't always truly where I was spending time. And it was an eye opener. Like, oh, wow, I have spent so much time doing XYZ and I didn't realize. So then being more intentional. But I do. And that kind of creates what we talked about earlier, that life by design. So if you're not spending time doing the things in the way that you would like to, then start making the changes now. Because if not, you're going to wake up a year from now still doing the exact same thing, talking about it instead.
Talking about it.
Well, Abagail, thank you so much. If anyone's been listening and they want to learn more about you, the Boss Project, where can they find you?
Yeah, you are welcome to head to bossproject.com and check out our various courses. You can also link over to our membership called the Co-op that's at creativetemplateshop.com to hear more about the strategies and design pieces that I am helping small business owners with. But if you want to follow me as a person, I definitely recommend following me at Abagail Says on Instagram. It's linked in Boss Project's bio, so it's really easy to find. And then I just started posting consistently on LinkedIn, and I would love some more followers over there. So if you can find me, Abagail Pumphrey over there, would love for you to follow along. And if you love podcasts, which I'm guessing you do based on listening to today's show, I definitely recommend that you go subscribe and listen to the Strategy Hour podcast. We're going to approach episode 1000 this year, which is
That's
absolutely wild. So I promise, regardless of what you want to learn about, there is something on there for you. Do not feel like you need to go in order, pick and choose your own adventure, have fun. I would love feedback on it. And if you have topic ideas you'd like me to cover in the future, definitely reach out.
Oh, thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough for your time. I hope you have been listening. And please go check out Abagail, be in the show notes for all the links and all the places that you will not regret it. Again, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely.
That's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Branded Impact Podcast. If today's episode sparked something in you, please take a second to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend who's ready to unlock their rebrand era. And if you're ready for a brand that's rooted in authenticity and built for impact, one that truly reflects your story, your energy, and your evolution, let's connect. Head to brandingbyjoe.com or DM me on Instagram at brandingbyjoe. Thanks for hanging out. Now get out there, show up with purpose, and make your branded impact. I'll see you next week.